Hello everyone and welcome to Keep Code Real channel. I hope that you are having the Wednesday of your life, and if not, well, it's a great opportunity to remove any dust from the keyboard and code away into the next chapter of our Stack Counselor project. Today we are beginning to write our version 0.2, which will feature the data gathering worker service. Before we dive into the technical aspects of our video, let's take an overview of why. Why do we need the worker service? Obviously, it will execute the backend tasks that are submitted by the main service. But what exactly does it mean? What the worker is going to actually do? Let's say for a moment, right, hypothetically, that we are a PC and we are running the worker service. And this instant we have paid attention that there is a new backend task to get the financial data for the Microsoft company. We will be using the official Security and Exchange Commission website. So we will go over to the sec.gov website. Takes a moment for it to load. Now, before we proceed any further, I would like to remind about our disclaimer. We are about to work with real financial data. And the steps that we're about to partake and we will partake in the future are logical steps, right? They are the steps that should be taken while investing. That being said, the project and the videos in the Stack Counselor project are by no means any guidelines that you should choose to take while investing. If you got any money and you want to invest, hire a professional who will tell you how to do so correctly. Let's put that aside and enter the developer tools. Now, I usually prefer to use anything that is Chromium based, for example, Google Chrome browser, or Microsoft Edge browser runs smoothly on Windows, and I think it eats less RAM, but doesn't really matter. What matters is the network tab in the developer tools. It will help us to monitor the exact requests and responses that are being dispatched between our browser and the SEC government website. If we want to access any data about Microsoft company, we should identify it at the SEC website. We do it with the help of the company acronym, or in other words, company stock symbol. In case of Microsoft, it's 4 letters, right? MSFT. As you can see, a couple of things have happened here. First of all, we have gotten a search result from the tool that is called EDGAR, and we can see that a Microsoft Corporation at EDGAR is identified with a unique number, which is CIK, or in other words, company ID. At the bottom, in our web developer tools, a couple of requests have been dispatched. Let's inspect them for a moment. Let's take a close look at the latest request. So first of all, its type is post. It has a destination URL, obviously. And as you can see, there's a form data that is passed along to the SEC web server, and it includes a JSON, a short one, with the keys typed MSFT. Cool. Now the response is a JSON object in itself. It's rather long, but the most interesting parts are ID. As you can see, it's basically the same CAK number that we have seen, with a slight difference, right? It doesn't have the trailing zeros before the non-zero numbers, and we can see the entity key right here, and the ID belongs to the Microsoft Corp or Microsoft Corporation. Let's mark what we have just seen, receiving a search result for the typed acronym or stack symbol, as step 1, and move on to the step 2. So we will clean the requests. We will type once again MSFT. Here's the search result. Now let's click on it and see what happens. Takes a moment for the website to load. Okay, we have arrived at the, well, you could say profile page of Microsoft Corporation at the EDGAR tool. And there are a couple of parts here, but we will be looking at the 10K annual reports, which contain the financial data of the corporation, of a company, for the past year and the year before it and before and so on. The second part that we should take a look is the web developer tools. The very first request, which has been dispatched the moment we have clicked the search result for Microsoft Corporation, is here. As you can see, it includes the company ID, the unique identifier at EDGAR. Let's move on to the headers. Okay, the request method is get. There's a different URL from what we have seen at the step number 1, and it can contain a body because it's a get request, but it contains a couple of parameters. Parameters are part of the URL, and they come after a question mark character. So the first parameter is CAK, the unique identifier of the company, and the other one, I don't really know what it means, but we will keep it. So in order to arrive to the company's profile page at the EDGAR tool, we have to send a get request with a couple of parameters. Let's mark this step as step number 2. Once we complete the step number 2, the question is, what else, right? Where do we go from here? Well, we will be iterating and examining each annual report independently. But for the manual example, let's only take some values from the latest annual report. We can clean our web developer tool. Anything that is about to happen, as you can see, I click something, but there are no requests, which means that the changes on the page are managed with the JavaScript. We are interested in view all 10Ks and 10Qs. The 10Qs stand for the quarterly reports. Let's filter them a little bit for our 10K. Now we will be clicking another link. Another request will be dispatched, which means this is a beginning of an additional step. Open filings. We have arrived at the 10K report main page, so to speak. As you can see, in order to get here, we have to send another get request, which contains the CAK of the company and the identifier of our 10K report, which is called a session number in the EDGAR tool. But the main page itself of the report doesn't really interest us. What we want is its contents. We will open our developer tool, and there's a link which is called interactive data. We will click on it, and it will redirect us to the actual contents of the report. And as you can see, there are a couple of types: the cover, and the most interesting part, financial statements. Let's move on to the beginning of the requests that have been registered at our web developer tools. As you can see, there's another get request to a different URL and a couple of parameters. Let's mark arriving to the contents of a 10K report as a step number 3. I will be needing to enlarge the font. Okay, this is good. So let's clean our web developer tools. Go to the available financial statements. Let's say we're interested in the balance sheets report. When we click it, there's another get request that is dispatched and it ends with R4. Now let's examine, for example, the income statements report. In order to get to its values, there's an additional get request and it ends with R2. As you may have guessed, in order to get to the document and entity information, we will need to send a get request that ends with R1. Now, these R's represent the types of the data that is available in the 10K report. Unfortunately, the data types are marked with different R's for every company. This is an issue, however, we'll tackle it in the future. For now, let's say that we want to go to the income statements and see how much the company has in revenue or net income. So let's clean once again our web developer tools. We will be needing to send the last, and it's going to be the last step, right? We will send a get request that ends with an R2 in Microsoft's case. And we can see that net income is available in the income statements report. We will be needing this value. Obviously, our Worker service will not be using browser, although it's possible nowadays. You got tools like Selenium and whatnot. We will be using the old, tested HTTP requests. So before we move on to the code, let's build them, right? Let's map where exactly we send what type of request and what parameters or what payload we need to pass. I am managing the requests for this project with the Postman app, as I've explained, for the convenience sake only. It's really comfortable for Windows. So we will be moving on now to the Postman app. In the Postman app, I've already created the collection of requests for the data gathering Worker service, and as you can see, there are the 4 steps that we have talked about. Let us examine the first step. Now, during the first step, we obtain the company ID of the company in the EDGAR tool. We will be needing to send a post request to this URL, and its body, its payload, will contain a JSON object, and inside keys typed we will be passing the company acronym. Let's send the request and extract from the response the company ID at the EDGAR tool. Okay. The response contains a JSON object which is rather long, but we are needing the underscore ID field, and the number out here is the CAK. Now we will move on to the second step, and during the second step we obtain the available 10K reports for the company. Let us copy the company ID, go to the next step. There are a couple of parameters. Action get company, I guess it's self-explanatory. The CAK is already filled with the company ID at the EDGAR. The type of the reports of the filings that we are looking for is 10K, and the count that we're interested in is 5 because we are interested to read the reports from the 2015 to 2020. I always prefer to read the reports for the 5 latest years for the company. Let's send the request and see what the response holds for us. The case with the available 10K filings, as you can see, is a little bit more complicated. It is an HTML document, which means that we will implement a couple of HTML parsers. But for the sake of the example, let's copy the contents of the response to a temporary point HTML file and open it in the browser. We need its location. Copy path, absolute path, cool. New tab, and this is more or less what our service will see. In order to get to the contents of a certain 10K report, our service will need to parse this document and access successively the links to the interactive data, right? Basically, we will build our parser so that it can access the following links. As you can see, they contain the URLs that we have already seen during the step 3. We will be needing to get to these URLs in order to access the 10K report content. And the next report holds a similar request with a different accession number, which is an ID, a unique ID of a 10K report. Back to the Postman app. I've already created an example for the step 3 request, obtain 10K report contents. As you can see, the parameters are already filled in. The action is view. We would like to view the contents of the 10K report for a certain company ID, and the report accession number, which is its unique ID. Let's send the request, and we receive a response, which is yet another HTML document. Let's copy paste it to our temporary point HTML file and have a look at it in the browser. Now, let's compare this page to the page that we have obtained manually through our browser entirely. The page from the browser looks a little bit more, beautiful, but the contents are basically the same, right? There are different types of financial statements, for example, income statements and balance sheets. Well, if we go to the HTML document that we have uncovered with the help of the Postman, there's the financial statements, and there's the income statements, and there's the balance sheets, and basically all the different data that we are interested in the 10K report. And here's a little trick. If we go to the developer tools at this page and move on, for example, to the income statements, because we would like, to see the net income of the company, it isn't really a link. It's, as you can see, it's a JavaScript, right? When we click on the link, some JavaScript code has been executed. Obviously, our service will not be able to execute any JavaScript because, it's not inside a browser, which is why we will implement a little workaround. The workaround is to use the types of available data. Now, if we go back to the manual version of the page, anytime we want to access, for example, income statements, income statements, a GET request is sent and it ends with the data type. Well, back to the Postman. Step number 4, to obtain a specific financial statement content, we will send yet another request and we will specify the statement type. Now, as you can see, if we send R1, we expect to get the document and entity information, right? If we click on it, there's a request with R1 that is dispatched. Let's do precisely the same in Postman. We send a request that ends with R1. obviously before it contains the accession number and the CAK. There's yet another HTML document. Let's copy paste it to our temporary file and load it. Voila! The same values that are available through the browser, right? For example, document type 10K, amendment flag, false, and the following values are also now available to our parser. And our HTML parser, for example, if it wants to access the 10K value, it will have to go to a table that contains the field and value and find the specific row that it's interested in. That is about it. Our worker service will mainly execute in a loop the following steps, right? It will obtain a company ID, it will see the available 10K filings or reports, it will collect the accession numbers of the reports for the last 5 years, it will iterate each accession number and check for the financial contents, it will iterate the financial contents and pull the values that we're interested in, like net income or how much does the company owe in total. And that's it. You could say that it's something like an automaton, right? A not so smart machine that runs in circles. Okay, we won't be needing the postman in the near future, so we can close it, and there is no longer need for the temporary .html document. Hopefully you understood how the process looks, in general. If you have any questions, I'm available, Gabro is available, you can reach out through different means. Obviously, the process might look overwhelming, and not only to beginners, but as we move on and implement each step in a code and we comment and document it the right way, the process will be clear to you. We need just a little bit of patience. As to the code itself, as you can see, I've already created the data gathering worker service directory for us, and it includes all the necessary components. Next week, we will start the implementation from our main.py file, where we will need, as you can see, to take into consideration that once our stock counselor project is fired up, we can now pass the argument to start not only main service but also the worker service. As to the internal contents of the new service, well, first of all, we have the worker API file, where we have external functions that are available, for example, in our main.py file. I'm talking about the stat data gathering worker service. It's all has been documented, and there are the steps that we need to implement, very similar to what we've already done with the main service. Worker API will be needing the help, first of all, of sec Communicator. This class will be responsible to send back and forth requests to the sec website. For example, a method get 10K accession numbers, where we generally send the request to receive available 10K reports for a certain company. In addition, our worker will need the help of an entity API, which will be responsible for the data persistence. It's a little bit different from the backend tasks. We are talking about the business data, for example, financial values, right? We will gather financial values for a certain company, and then we will need to persist them, to store them in a database, which is where the entity class will be handy. And there's also the backend tasks class, It's very similar to what we've seen in the main service. It will manage for us the backend tasks. Now there's a little difference in our directory structure. For example, as you can see, main service contained only files, right? And all of these files were at the same path level. As to the worker service, there's a directory Communicator, and it contains files and configurations that are necessary for the Communicator API to function properly. The Communicator directory will contain contents that are unique specifically for the Communicator class, and no other class should use them. First of all, it will contain the configurations for our HTTP requests. For example, if we want to obtain a company ID, which is step 1, we need to know the URL where we send our request, headers, right, which content type we send and what content we expect to receive, and also the payload because it's a post request. In addition, we have a couple of HTML parsers. Each parser knows to tackle a single type of HTML page and retrieve the necessary information from those pages. Well, this is it for today's video. As I've mentioned before, it may be a little bit overwhelming. Luckily, nobody is watching these videos right now, and by the time, and if they get any popularity or whatever, I suppose the whole project, the whole Stack Counselor will already be done. So if you have any questions, first of all, you can send them to me or to Gabro in any way that is comfortable for you. Or you could just skip to the next videos where we actually implement our parsers, our Communicator, where our worker basically does what it has to do, and I'm sure it will clear the picture for you. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, have a productive week, and we will catch up with you next Wednesday.